At the grandest gala of the year, one powerful man stands on stage, adored, applauded, and completely unaware that his greatest downfall is already walking out the door. Her name is Hallie Foster, his wife, his quiet queen, and the woman he just humiliated in front of 800 people. But what no one knows is that she's been planning this moment for 8 years. A plan so perfect, it will destroy his empire, his ego, and crown her as the woman the world never saw coming. Revenge isn't loud. It's quiet, it's patient, and it's wearing a crown. If that gave you chills, hit like, drop your thoughts in the comments, share it with someone who loves powerful women, and don't forget to subscribe. The story's just getting started. The crystal chandeliers of the Metropolitan Museum cast diamonds of light across 800 of New York's most powerful faces. Roman Foster stood at the podium in his perfectly tailored Brooks Brothers suit, silver hair gleaming under the spotlights, accepting the Philanthropist of the Year award with the practiced humility of a man who had never been humble a day in his life. This honor, he said, his voice carrying that particular timbre of wealth and authority that came from never being told no, belongs not just to me, but to everyone who believes in building a better New York. Polite applause rippled through the ballroom. At the head table, his wife Hallie sat with her hands folded over her 5-month pregnant belly, wearing a soft blue gown that made her look ethereal and fragile, exactly how Roman preferred her to look. Amelia Vance, the sharp-eyed Times columnist who had made a career of exposing the city's elite, approached the table with her microphone. Mrs. Foster, your family's Beaumont Trust has been a New York institution for 3 generations. Will the trust be partnering with your husband's $200 million West Side Renewal project? Before Hallie could open her mouth, Roman's laugh cut through the air like a knife. Amelia, Amelia, he turned to address the crowd, his smile wide and cruel. Ladies and gentlemen, my wife runs the Beaumont Trust the way other women run book clubs. It's therapeutic for her. Uncomfortable chuckles scattered through the audience. Some people shifted in their seats. Amelia persisted. But Mr. Foster, the Beaumont Trust was being the operative word. Roman was warming to his performance now, drunk on champagne and his own perceived invincibility. When I married Hallie 12 years ago, her father had drunk that trust down to pennies on the dollar. God rest his soul, but Robert Beaumont was a better drunk than businessman. Gasps erupted around the room. Hallie's hand trembled against her water glass, but she didn't move. I've been quietly bankrolling Hallie's little charity projects. 50,000 here for a library bake sale, 30,000 there for some poetry reading in Queens. It keeps her occupied while she's, well, breeding. He gestured casually toward her pregnant belly. Her job is to look beautiful, make sure my daughter does her homework, and stay out of the way of real business. And she does it perfectly. Don't you, sweetheart? The room fell silent, the kind of silence that comes before something shatters. 2 tables away, Vivian Drake, Roman's executive assistant, smirked into her champagne glass. The red dress she wore was designed to command attention, and it did. She had been Roman's mistress for 3 years, though most people in this room were polite enough to pretend they didn't know. Hallie stood slowly, every eye turned to watch her. Her hand instinctively protected her belly, and for just a moment, a single tear traced down her porcelain cheek. "Excuse me," she whispered. She didn't walk to the powder room. She walked straight through the center of the ballroom, past 800 staring faces, past the tables laden with untouched filet mignon and $30 a glass wine, past her husband, who was already turning back to the podium with a dismissive laugh. "Pregnancy hormones," he told the crowd. "You know how women get. She'll be back once she powders her nose and has a good cry." But Amelia Vance wasn't laughing. She was writing in her notepad with furious precision, her jaw set in a way that Roman Foster, in his arrogance, failed to notice. Outside, the October night air hit Hallie like a slap. She gasped, steadying herself against the museum's stone facade. Her driver materialized from the line of black town cars. "Mrs. Foster, are you all right?" She held up one hand, composing herself with visible effort. Then she pulled out her phone and dialed a number she had memorized years ago. "Arthur?" Her voice was steady now, cold as winter steel. "It's time. Activate the plan." The tears vanished from her face as if they had never existed. Her spine straightened. Her gray eyes, which Roman had always mistaken for timid, gleamed with something ancient and dangerous. The screen faded to black. White text appeared. What Roman Foster didn't know, his wife had spent 8 years preparing for this exact moment. 12 years earlier, Hallie Beaumont had been someone else entirely. At 26, she was a senior analyst at Goldman Sachs, Private Wealth Management Division, with a corner office view of the Hudson River and a reputation for turning struggling portfolios into gold mines. She wore Armani power suits and had just been invited to join the partners track. Her Dartmouth education had been put to excellent use, and her family name, while old and respected, was something she rarely leaned on. She preferred to earn her success. The charity auction at the Met was supposed to be just another networking event. She had attended dozens of them, always professional, always polite, never particularly interested in the wealthy men who tried to impress her with their stock portfolios. Then Roman Foster outbid 3 other collectors for a Warhol, his voice booming across the auction hall with the confidence of someone who had never lost at anything. Hallie, more amused than impressed, waited until the final moment and raised her paddle. 300,000. Roman's head snapped around. Their eyes met across the room. He was handsome in that aggressive alpha way that usually left her cold. But there was something else in his expression. Curiosity, challenge, interest that seemed for once to be about more than just her appearance. He let her have the painting. Afterward, he found her at the bar. Most women at these things let their husbands do the bidding. "I don't have a husband," she said coolly. "And I buy my own art." He laughed, and it seemed genuine. Roman Foster. "I know who you are, Mr. Foster. Everyone knows who you are." "Then you have me at a disadvantage, Miss Beaumont, Hallie Beaumont." Recognition flashed in his eyes. The Beaumont name still carried weight in certain circles, though her father's recent death and the family trust's financial troubles were poorly kept secrets. "Let me buy you dinner," he said, "to apologize for trying to steal your painting." She should have said no. Her friends at Goldman had warned her about Roman Foster. Leverage to his eyeballs, they said. His debt-to-equity ratio is insane. He's one bad quarter away from bankruptcy. Stay away. But he sent flowers to her office the next day. Not roses, peonies. Her favorite, though she'd never told him. He'd somehow found out. The helicopter ride to the Hamptons came next. Then the yacht. Then Central Park on a perfect October afternoon, leaves turning gold and red, when he went down on one knee and said words that should have made her suspicious, but instead made her heart soar. "With your brains and my ambition, plus the Beaumont name, we'll own this city, baby." She said yes. The wedding was lavish. 400 guests. Her father's best friend, Arthur Kensington, then 67 and chairman of the Metropolitan Legacy Fund, pulled her aside before she walked down the aisle. "Are you sure about this, Hallie? Your father had concerns about Roman's business practices." "I love him, Arthur. He's not like the men in my family. He builds things. He has vision." Arthur's expression was troubled, but he kissed her forehead. "Then I wish you every happiness, my dear." The first year was a slow erosion of self, so gradual she barely noticed. Roman suggested she take a leave from Goldman. "Just temporarily," he said. "Just until they settled into married life." "I need you to run our life like a business, Hallie. I have the houses, the staff, the social calendar. That's a full-time job for someone with your skills." She hesitated. She'd worked so hard to build her career. "Besides," he added, his voice dropping to that intimate tone that still made her stomach flutter, "we don't need your income. Let me take care of you." She took the leave. It became permanent. In year 2, she got pregnant with Sophie. The hormones made her emotional, weepy. Roman grew impatient with her moods. "You're being paranoid," he'd say when she questioned him about late nights at the office. "This is what pregnancy does to women. My mother went crazy when she was pregnant with me." She found the text from an intern named Brittany 3 days before Sophie was born. When she confronted him, he convinced her she was imagining things. The pregnancy had made her irrational. He loved her. Only her. She wanted desperately to believe him. Sophie's birth should have brought them closer. Instead, it created a chasm. Roman disappeared into his work, traveling 200 days a year. When he was home, he criticized everything. The way Hallie dressed, how she spent money, her postpartum weight. Year 3, she tried to return to consulting work, part-time, just to feel like herself again. Roman's explosion was volcanic. Our daughter needs her mother, not some career-obsessed shrew. Do you want Sophie raised by nannies? Is that what kind of mother you want to be? The guilt was crushing. She stayed home. That was when she found evidence of the second affair. A model in Miami, hotel receipts, photos on social media. This time when she confronted him, he didn't bother lying. Fine, you want a divorce? Try it. You signed a prenup, Hallie. You get nothing. And I will bury you in custody court. He showed her a file his lawyers had prepared. Given your family history of mental instability, no judge will give you full custody. Your father was an alcoholic who killed himself. I'll argue depression and suicide risk run in your family. The words hit like physical blows. Best case, you get 50-50 custody. Worst case, I get Sophie and you get supervised visitation. So go ahead, file, see what happens. She didn't file. She had no income, no recent work experience, no leverage. Her therapist, Dr. Ellen Rivers, gave her the clinical term: financial abuse, economic coercion, intimate partner control. It didn't matter what you called it. She was trapped. That was when something inside Hallie Beaumont Foster died. Or perhaps it was when something else was born. She stopped trying to leave. She started planning. Year 4 of the marriage marked the beginning of Hallie's transformation, though no one, least of all Roman, noticed. She enrolled in online courses, advanced corporate finance through Columbia, forensic accounting through NYU, corporate law fundamentals from Cornell. When Roman asked about her laptop, she told him it was for book club discussions and yoga class scheduling. He never asked to see the screen. She began attending charity board meetings, small ones, unglamorous ones. The Bronx Public Library Foundation, the Queens Women's Shelter Alliance, the Brooklyn Community Gardens Collective. Let her play charity, lady, Roman told his business partners over scotch in his study. Keeps her out of my hair, gives her something to feel important about. What Roman didn't see was that Hallie wasn't playing. She was learning the real language of power in New York City. Not the loud, performative power that men like Roman wielded in boardrooms and on cable news. The quiet power, the kind that came from knowing everyone's secrets, from being underestimated, from connecting the right people at the right time. The Beaumont Trust had been in shambles when her father died. $12 million in assets, poorly managed, bleeding money to outdated investments, and bloated administrative costs. Roman had glanced at the books once, declared it pocket change and lost causes, and told her to let his accountants handle the charity write-offs for tax purposes. He never looked at it again. Hallie did. Every single day, she fired the old guard her father had employed, hired young, hungry analysts who owed her loyalty instead of nostalgia. She restructured the entire portfolio. The investments were surgical and strategic. $500,000 into a Brooklyn biotech startup that was developing cancer screening technology. It seemed like nothing. Roman wouldn't have noticed if she'd told him, which she didn't. 3 years later, that company was acquired by Johnson & Johnson for $80 million. The Beaumont Trust's stake was worth $8 million. She invested in distressed real estate in Queens and the Bronx, neighborhoods that Roman dismissed as never going to gentrify. Within 5 years, every property had tripled in value. Green energy companies, women-owned businesses, tech startups run by founders who'd been rejected by traditional venture capital because they didn't fit the profile, didn't go to the right schools, didn't know the right people. Hallie knew the right people now. She was becoming the right people. By year 6, the Beaumont Trust was worth $80 million. Roman still thought it was barely solvent. By year 8, it was worth $240 million. She kept the growth quiet. The investments were structured through shell LLCs and offshore holdings, the same tactics she'd watched Roman use to hide his debt. The irony wasn't lost on her, but money alone wasn't enough. She needed allies. Arthur Kensington had been her father's best friend. In the years after Robert Beaumont's death, Arthur had watched Hallie's marriage with growing concern. He saw the way Roman spoke to her, the way she flinched sometimes when her husband raised his voice, the way her light dimmed year by year. They began meeting for coffee, quietly, at a small cafe in the West Village where no one from their social circle would think to look. Your father would be so proud of what you've done with the trust, Arthur said one gray November morning. You're twice the strategist he ever was. Arthur, can I ask you something? Of course, my dear. If something happened to Roman's business, if it came out that he'd been, say, committing financial crimes, would that void our prenuptial agreement? Arthur's coffee cup paused halfway to his lips. He studied her with his sharp blue eyes. That's a very specific question, Hallie. Hypothetically. Hypothetically, he said slowly, if it could be proven that one party entered into a marriage contract while actively committing fraud, and that the fraud continued throughout the marriage, then yes, the contract would be considered voidable. Everything would be subject to equitable distribution. In custody, if the criminal activity demonstrated unfitness as a parent, or if there was evidence of abuse, emotional, financial, or otherwise, the court would act in the best interest of the child. Hallie nodded, filing the information away. Are you in danger? Arthur asked quietly. Not the kind you're thinking, but I've been in a cage for a long time, Arthur. I'm planning my escape. When I move, I'll need help. What kind of help? The kind only the chairman of the Metropolitan Legacy Fund can provide. Arthur leaned back in his chair. I've been chairman for 30 years. I'm planning to retire soon. I'll be announcing my succession at the annual gala this October. Who are you considering? There are several candidates. He paused. Roman has made it known he expects to be chosen. And will he be? Arthur's smile was subtle and dangerous. That depends, my dear, on whether someone more qualified emerges. Marcus Reed had been Hallie's friend since Dartmouth. Back then, he'd been pre-law and she'd been business track. They'd studied together in the library, dated briefly their sophomore year before realizing they worked better as friends. He'd been in love with her for 20 years, a fact he thought he hid better than he did. Now he ran a boutique family law firm in Tribeca, specializing in high-net-worth divorces. I need you to build me a case, Hallie told him over lunch at a restaurant in Brooklyn, far from Manhattan's prying eyes. But no one can know. Not yet. How long do I have? 3 years, maybe 4. Marcus's eyes widened. That's a long timeline, Hallie. I need it to be airtight. He's going to fight dirty. I need to be prepared for everything. What am I documenting? She slid a folder across the table. Inside were photographs, bank statements, text messages, emails, evidence of affairs, evidence of financial manipulation, evidence of verbal and emotional abuse meticulously recorded over years. My God, Marcus breathed. How long have you been gathering this? Since year 3, I started recording our arguments after the Miami incident. New York is a one-party consent state. He has no idea. This is enough for divorce with cause. You could file tomorrow. I don't want divorce with cause, Marcus. I want to destroy him so completely that he never threatens me or my daughter again. I want him in prison. I want his company dissolved. I want him to lose everything the way he's made me lose everything. And then, when he's at his absolute lowest, I want him to understand that the wife he dismissed, the woman he called stupid and decorative, was the architect of his annihilation. Marcus stared at her. This wasn't the soft-spoken woman who'd been dimming for years. This was someone new, someone forged in fire and rage and calculation. I'll help you, he said quietly, whatever you need. The final piece of her army was the hardest to recruit. Detective Sarah Jenkins ran the NYPD Financial Crimes Unit. She was 40 years old, a 20-year veteran, and had been investigating Foster Holdings for 18 months. White-collar crime was notoriously difficult to prosecute. Rich men had good lawyers, paper trails could be burned, witnesses could be bought. She needed someone on the inside. The anonymous tip came through a secure server. Financial documents, wire transfer records, shell company structures, evidence of securities fraud, tax evasion, bribery of city officials, everything meticulously documented. The return address was a library in Queens. Jenkins traced the IP address to a public computer. She reviewed the security footage. A woman in sunglasses and a headscarf, impossible to identify. 3 days later, her phone rang. Unknown number. Detective Jenkins, my name isn't important. What's important is that Roman Foster is committing multiple federal crimes, and I can give you everything you need to prosecute him, but I need something in exchange. I don't make deals with anonymous tipsters. You will with me, because I'm his wife." The silence on the line stretched out. "Keep talking," Jenkins said. They met in person once, a parking garage in the Bronx. Hallie wore the sunglasses and headscarf again. Jenkins wore her off-duty clothes. "Why are you doing this?" Jenkins asked. "Because he's a criminal, and he deserves to be in prison. And because I need leverage." "What kind of leverage?" "The kind that ensures I never have to be afraid of him again. If you testify, he'll know you betrayed him. I'm not going to testify. You're going to get everything you need without me. I'm just pointing you in the right direction. And when you arrest him, it's going to happen at the moment of his greatest triumph. That's non-negotiable." "Why does the timing matter?" Hallie's smile was cold. "Because I want him to understand what it feels like to have everything ripped away when you least expect it. I want him to feel what I felt." Jenkins studied her. "You're either very brave or very damaged." "I'm both, Detective. We all are. The question is what we do about it." By year 8, all the pieces were in place. The trust was worth $240 million. Arthur was ready to retire and name his successor. Marcus had a divorce case that would make legal history. Detective Jenkins had a warrant ready to execute pending one final piece of evidence, a confession on tape. The only question was when to strike. Then Hallie discovered she was pregnant again. She sat in the bathroom of her apartment, staring at the positive test, tears streaming down her face. Not tears of joy, tears of rage and despair and resignation. She was 38 years old. She didn't want another child with Roman. She wanted her freedom. But she was also 38, and this might be her last chance at another baby. A sibling for Sophie, a daughter to raise without fear, without walking on eggshells, without teaching her that love meant accepting cruelty. She made her decision. When she told Roman, his face twisted with irritation. "Are you kidding me? Hallie, I'm 45 years old. I don't want to start over with diapers." "I'm keeping it." "Fine, but after this kid's born, you're getting your tubes tied. I'm done." 2 weeks before the gala, she overheard him on the phone with his lawyer. "Yeah, after I get the MLF chairmanship announced, file the divorce papers. I don't need her anymore. The Beaumont name opened doors, but I'm established now. She gets the minimum, $2 million in the Connecticut house. I keep everything else. And we crush her on custody." Mental instability angle. Her father was a drunk who killed himself. Depression runs in families. Hallie stood in the hallway, one hand on her pregnant belly, the other pressed against the wall to steady herself. She didn't cry. She pulled out her phone and called Arthur. "It's time. I'm ready." "Are you absolutely certain once we start this, there's no going back?" "He's already filed for divorce in his mind, Arthur. I'm just expediting the process. Let's give him his big night, and then let's take it all away." 2 weeks before the gala, Hallie convened her team in Arthur Kensington's brownstone on the Upper East Side. The room smelled of old books and older money. Rain streaked the windows. Around the mahogany table sat the people Hallie had spent 8 years cultivating. Arthur at the head, silver-haired and sharp-eyed. Marcus with his leather portfolio and determined jaw. Detective Sarah Jenkins in plain clothes, her badge in her pocket. And Patricia Coleman, the forensic accountant whose audit had taken 16 months to complete. Patricia spread documents across the table like a card dealer, revealing a winning hand. "Foster Holdings is a house of cards built on fraud," she said without preamble. $85 million in hidden debt spread across 14 shell companies. He's been cooking the books for 7 years. She pulled up a chart. The West Side Renewal Project that everyone thinks is his masterpiece? It's financed through companies that exist only on paper. 11 of the 14 entities are in default. If anyone actually examined the structure, the whole thing collapses. Jenkins leaned forward. "We've got him on securities fraud, wire fraud, tax evasion, and bribery of city officials. That's federal jurisdiction. 20 years minimum if convicted on all counts." "But aren't," Hallie asked, because there was always a but. "But his lawyers are exceptional. Without a confession on tape, they'll tie this up in court for years. They'll claim accounting errors, blame subordinates, argue selective prosecution. We need him to incriminate himself directly." Marcus tapped his pen against his legal pad. The prenup is ironclad under normal circumstances. But if we prove he committed fraud during the marriage, specifically fraud that affected marital assets, the entire contract becomes voidable. Everything becomes subject to equitable distribution. What about Sophie? Hallie's voice was steady, but her hands trembled slightly. If we go nuclear, what happens to custody? We file for emergency custody based on his affairs, his neglect, his verbal abuse, and his imminent arrest. We have recordings of him threatening you. We have testimony from Sophie's teachers about his absences. We have a pattern of behavior that demonstrates unfitness. Combined with pending federal charges, no judge will give him custody. Arthur cleared his throat. The MLF board has been considering Roman for chairman. He's been lobbying aggressively. The vote is next week. Everyone turned to look at him. What if we let him think he's won? Arthur continued. We nominate him, let him believe he's untouchable. And at the gala, when he expects to be crowned, we announce a different name. Whose? Hallie asked, though something in Arthur's expression told her she already knew the answer. Yours. The room fell silent except for the rain. Arthur, I can't. I'm not qualified. You've grown the Beaumont Trust by 2,000% in 8 years. You sit on 12 boards. You've funded 47 small businesses that have created 600 jobs. You've done more for this city quietly than Roman has done loudly in 20 years. You're more qualified than any candidate we've had in 30 years. Hallie's mind raced. If I'm MLF chair, I control $800 million in philanthropic funding, including approval authority over Roman's West Side Renewal Project, Arthur finished, which I can tell you right now will be denied. It's a disaster waiting to happen, built on fraud, designed to displace 2,000 low-income families. The plan crystallized in Hallie's mind. So we let him think he's won. We buy up his debt, we get him to confess on tape, and at his moment of triumph, we arrest him, and I take the crown he thought was his. That's the idea, Arthur said quietly. But Hallie, this will be brutal. The press will eviscerate him. The scandal will be enormous. Are you prepared for that? Is Sophie? Hallie thought of her 9-year-old daughter, smart, perceptive Sophie, who flinched when her father raised his voice, who asked why mommy cried in the bathroom, who deserved to grow up knowing that women didn't have to accept cruelty. Sophie already knows her father is cruel. I'd rather she learn that women can fight back. Then we have one problem, Jenkins said. We need him on tape confessing. He's too paranoid to talk openly. We need someone he trusts. Vivian Drake, Hallie said, his assistant, his mistress. She'll never betray him, Marcus objected. She will if she's going down with him. Hallie turned to Patricia. Does your audit include Vivian? Patricia flipped through her files. She's been embezzling for 3 years, $4.2 million through phantom vendor payments and expense account fraud. I've got the wire transfers. Hallie smiled, but there was no warmth in it. Then we give her a choice, help us or go to prison with him. The plan required precision timing. Patricia's team would quietly buy up Roman's debt through intermediaries. Jenkins would prepare arrest warrants but hold them until the gala. Marcus would file emergency custody motions, backdated to take effect the day of the gala. Arthur would orchestrate the board vote in the announcement, and Hallie would recruit Vivian Drake to be the final piece. One more thing, Hallie said, I need a crown. What? Marcus looked confused. An actual crown, a tiara. I want to walk into that ballroom wearing my grandmother's emerald tiara. I want everyone in that room to understand exactly who I am. Arthur's expression softened. Your grandmother's tiara was sold years ago, dear. After your father, then I'll commission a replica. I want it exact. Same emeralds, same diamonds, same setting. I want it to catch every light in that ballroom. Cost is irrelevant. She stood, placing both hands on the table. Roman thinks power is about being the loudest voice in the room. I'm going to teach him that real power is about being the most prepared. Hallie found Vivian Drake at a coffee shop in Tribeca on a Monday morning. It wasn't an accident. She'd been tracking Roman's assistant's movements for weeks, learning her patterns. Vivian looked up from her macchiato, and for just a moment, surprise flickered across her carefully composed face. Then the mask returned, cool and impenetrable. Mrs. Foster? What a surprise. Is it? Hallie slid into the seat across from her without waiting for an invitation. I know you've been sleeping with my husband for 3 years, Vivian. I know about the apartment in Chelsea he pays for, the American Express black card in your name, the weekend trips to Miami. Vivian's jaw tightened. If you're here to make a scene, I'm here to offer you a deal. Don't leave. Vivian's hand was halfway to her purse. Slowly, she settled back into her chair. Hallie placed a folder on the table between them. Plain manila, utterly unremarkable. Patricia Coleman's forensic audit. You've stolen $4.2 million from Foster Holdings over 3 years. Wire fraud, embezzlement, conspiracy. That's 10 to 15 years in federal prison. The color drained from Vivian's face. I don't know what you're... Don't. Hallie's voice was quiet but sharp. Don't insult both our intelligence. I'm not here to judge you. I'm here to offer you immunity. Why would you do that? Because Roman is going down. Financial crimes, fraud, bribery. Detective Sarah Jenkins at NYPD has a warrant ready. The FBI is involved. It's federal charges, Vivian. He's looking at 20 years. And right now, you're looking at going down with him. Vivian's hands wrapped around her coffee cup like it was the only solid thing in a tilting world. What do you want? I need him on tape confessing. He's too smart to talk to police. But he'll talk to you. At the gala, find a private moment. Get him to admit to the bribery, the offshore accounts, the fraud, everything. You want me to wear a wire? Yes. And if I do this, you'll give me immunity? More than that, I'll give you a job. Chief Financial Officer of the Beaumont Trust. $300,000 a year, full benefits, clean slate. You're smart, Vivian. You got a Wharton MBA. You're wasted being Roman's assistant and mistress. Work for me instead. Vivian laughed, but it was hollow. Why would you help me? I've been sleeping with your husband. You're welcome to him. I'm trying to protect my daughters. And despite everything, you're brilliant and desperate. That makes you dangerous to him and useful to me. So what's it going to be? Prison or a second chance? The rain had started again, drumming against the coffee shop windows. People hurried past outside, umbrellas blooming like mushrooms. What does he lose? Vivian asked finally. Everything. His company, his reputation, his freedom, his wife, his daughter, his position in society, all of it. And you get my life back, my daughter, my self-respect, and the chairmanship of the Metropolitan Legacy Fund. Vivian's eyes widened. You're taking the MLF chair? Arthur Kensington is nominating me. The board votes this week. Roman thinks he's getting it. I know. That's the point. Vivian was quiet for a long time, watching the rain. Finally, she looked at Hallie with something like respect. He really has no idea, does he? All these years, he thought you were just the pretty wife. Decorative, stupid. People see what they expect to see. Roman expected a victim, so that's what I showed him. What do you need me to say to him? Get him talking about the bribery of the city inspector, the offshore accounts in the Cayman Islands. Make him feel safe, powerful. Men like Roman can't resist bragging when they think they've won. When is this happening? The gala is Saturday, 2 weeks from now. Detective Jenkins will fit you with a wire the day before. It's FBI grade, undetectable. Vivian nodded slowly. If I do this, if I betray him, he'll destroy me. You understand that? He'll be in federal custody, Vivian. He won't be able to destroy anyone ever again. Then I'm in. What do I do? Over the next 2 weeks, the pieces fell into place with the precision of a Swiss watch. Patricia Coleman's team acquired Roman's debt through shell companies registered in Delaware and the Cayman Islands. Roman received notification that an investment group, Smang Group, had purchased his obligations from his creditors. He assumed it was routine restructuring. He had no idea his wife now owned him. Detective Jenkins coordinated with the FBI. The arrest would happen at the gala itself, in front of 800 witnesses. Maximum humiliation, maximum impact. Marcus filed emergency custody motions with family court. The judge, who happened to sit on the board of the Beaumont Trust Scholarship Fund, fast-tracked the hearing. The order would be executed the afternoon of the gala. Arthur Kensington made his phone call to Roman on Thursday afternoon. Congratulations, Roman. The board has voted. You're our next chairman. We'll make the announcement at the gala. On the other end of the line, Roman's whoop of triumph could be heard across the room. That evening, Roman called Vivian. Tonight changes everything. After I'm chairman, I'm bulletproof. I can finally dump Hallie without consequences. What if she fights the divorce? His laugh was cruel. With what? She's got no money, no leverage. She'll take the $2 million and disappear into whatever Connecticut suburb spawned her. I'll keep Sophie on weekends, enough to look like a good father. It's perfect. Vivian, sitting in her Chelsea apartment with Detective Jenkins and Hallie listening on a monitor, met Hallie's eyes across the room. The look they exchanged needed no words. On Friday, Hallie visited Harry Winston with a photograph of her grandmother's tiara. The jeweler studied it thoughtfully. This is an extraordinary piece. Art Deco, 1923. Your grandmother had exquisite taste. Can you replicate it? The emeralds alone would cost. Cost is irrelevant. I need it by tomorrow evening. Tomorrow, Mrs. Foster, that's impossible. I'm prepared to pay double your rush fee, triple, whatever it takes. This tiara will be worn once for one evening to make a statement that will define the rest of my life. Name your price. The jeweler named his price. Hallie didn't flinch. Saturday morning dawned clear and cold. In her new apartment in Brooklyn Heights, Hallie made breakfast for Sophie. Scrambled eggs, toast, orange juice. Normal, routine, calm. Mommy, why did you leave Daddy? Sophie was 9 years old, dark-haired and gray-eyed like her mother, perceptive beyond her years. Hallie knelt so they were eye level. Because sometimes the bravest thing you can do is walk away from someone who hurts you. Is Daddy going to be mad? Probably, but you and your baby sister are safe. That's all that matters. It's a girl? Sophie's eyes lit up. Yes, sweetie, you're going to have a little sister. Sophie hugged her fiercely. I'm glad we left, Mommy. Meanwhile, across town in the penthouse at 740 Park Avenue, Roman prepared his acceptance speech. He'd rewritten it 14 times, each version more grandiose than the last. He stood before the mirror in his dressing room, rehearsing his delivery. When I started Foster Holdings 20 years ago, I had a vision, he called Vivian. Tonight, I become chairman of the most powerful philanthropic organization in New York. This is everything we've worked for. I'm proud of you, Vivian said, and managed not to choke on the lie. At 3 in the afternoon, Hallie began her transformation. Hair swept up in an elegant chignon, makeup subtle but flawless. The emerald green Oscar de la Renta gown fit like it had been painted on her body, the empire waist accommodating her 5-month pregnant belly, while somehow making her look powerful rather than vulnerable. And finally, the crown. The jeweler delivered it personally in an armed car. When Hallie placed it on her head, the emeralds caught the afternoon light and blazed like green fire. She looked at herself in the mirror. The woman looking back was not the trembling wife who'd walked out of the gala 2 weeks ago. This woman was a queen. Her phone buzzed. A text from Arthur. The board is ready. The announcement is at 9. Are you? She typed back. I've been ready for 8 years. The Metropolitan Museum of Art blazed with light, and town cars and limousines discharged their passengers onto the red carpet. Photographers shouted names. Reporters angled for quotes. 800 of New York's most powerful people entered the Grand Hall, and not one of them knew that the evening they thought was Roman Foster's coronation was actually going to be his execution. Roman arrived with Sophie at 7 sharp, working the red carpet like a politician. Mr. Foster, congratulations on your chairmanship. Where's your wife? Is it true you're divorcing? His smile never wavered. Hallie's not feeling well. The pregnancy, doctor's orders to rest. She sends her regrets. Sophie, in a blue dress that matched her mother's eyes, said nothing. She knew her mother was fine. She also knew better than to contradict her father in public. Inside the ballroom, crystal chandeliers cast prisms of light across tables draped in cream silk. Ice sculptures of New York landmarks anchored massive floral arrangements. Champagne flowed. The city's elite air kissed and assessed each other's net worth with practiced glances. Vivian arrived separately, stunning in crimson, the wire taped to her ribs beneath the dress. She'd practiced breathing normally for hours. The FBI agent who'd fitted her with it had been impressed by her composure. Just remember, Detective Jenkins had told her, we need him to admit to specific crimes, bribery, tax evasion, fraud. Get him to name names and dollar amounts if you can. Arthur Kensington worked the room with the ease of someone who'd been doing it for 30 years. He stopped at Roman's table. Big night for you, Roman. I'm honored, Arthur. I won't let you down. I'm sure you won't. Arthur's smile was enigmatic. Senator Patricia Hayes approached during cocktail hour. Roman, congratulations. Though I have to say, some of my constituents in the West Side are concerned about the displacement your project will cause. Roman waved a dismissive hand. Senator, you can't make an omelet without breaking eggs. Progress requires sacrifice. Those tenants will be relocated, compensated fairly. They'll thank me eventually. The senator's expression was carefully neutral. I'm sure they will. Amelia Vance circled like a shark who'd scented blood. Mr. Foster, where is your wife tonight? There are rumors of a separation. My wife is home resting, Roman said smoothly. She's 7 months pregnant. The lie came easily. Hallie was only 5 months along, but Roman had never kept precise track. Doctor's orders, she's devastated to miss tonight. I'm sure she is, Amelia murmured, making notes. At 8 o'clock, Vivian caught Roman's eye across the ballroom, a slight tilt of her head toward the exit. He excused himself from a conversation with the mayor and followed her into a private hallway outside the main ballroom. The hallway was quieter, intimate. Vivian made sure they were alone. Roman, we need to talk. Not here, this is my night. It's about the development project. The city inspector called me this afternoon. Roman's expression darkened. Gerald Morrison, what did he want? He's asking about the permits, says there are irregularities in the paperwork. That's impossible. I paid him $250,000 to approve those permits. Cash, untraceable. The wire caught every word. What if Hallie's lawyers find out? What if Hallie doesn't have lawyers, Roman snapped. And even if she did, the money trail is clean. Offshore accounts, Cayman Islands, shell companies within shell companies. I learned from the best money launderers in the business. But what about the fraud charges? If they investigate, they won't because Hallie is stupid. She's a decorative object. She can't even balance a checkbook. The Beaumont Trust? I've been funding that joke for years out of my own pocket so she feels useful. Tonight I become chairman of the MLF, and in 2 weeks I file for divorce. She gets her $2 million, I get my freedom, and you and I can finally stop hiding. We can be together openly. Vivian made herself smile. What about Sophie? Joint custody on paper, but I'd travel 200 days a year. Hallie will do all the actual parenting. I just need to look like a good father for the custody hearing. Vivian touched her earpiece, the signal to Jenkins that they had everything they needed. Stop worrying, Roman said, pulling her close. After tonight, we're untouchable. He kissed her. Vivian closed her eyes and thought about second chances. They returned to the ballroom separately. Vivian found Detective Jenkins in the crowd, gave a subtle nod. Jenkins moved toward the museum's security office where FBI agents were waiting. Dinner was served at 8:30. Roman sat at the head table next to Arthur Kensington and Senator Hayes. The empty seat beside him, with its untouched place setting, seemed to mock him. After the main course was cleared, Arthur stood and approached the podium. The room quieted. Ladies and gentlemen, it's my privilege to introduce tonight's Philanthropist of the Year, a man who needs no introduction but deserves all our recognition, Roman Foster. The applause was polite but not enthusiastic. Roman made his way to the stage, his smile wide and confident. His speech hit all the expected notes. Humble beginnings that weren't actually that humble. Overcoming challenges that were mostly invented. His commitment to New York. His vision for the future. His gratitude to everyone who had supported him. Then came the question from Amelia Vance. Mr. Foster, will the Beaumont Trust be partnering with your West Side Renewal Project? And Roman, drunk on champagne and perceived victory, said the words that would be his undoing. Amelia, my wife runs the Beaumont Trust the way other women run book clubs. It's therapeutic for her. The rest followed like a landslide. The mocking of her father, the dismissal of her work, the crude comments about her pregnancy. Every word captured on dozens of phones uploaded to social media in real time, spreading across the internet like wildfire. He finished his speech to weak applause and an uncomfortable silence. People were looking at their phones, frowning. The comments were already trending on Twitter. Vile. Disgusting. Who talks about their pregnant wife like that? But Roman, insulated by ego and champagne, noticed none of it. Arthur took the stage again. Thank you, Roman, for those illuminating remarks. Now, as you all know, tonight we announced the new chairman of the Metropolitan Legacy Fund. Roman straightened his tie, preparing to stand. This decision was not easy. We considered many qualified candidates. We needed someone with vision, someone with integrity, someone who understands that true philanthropy isn't about buildings with your name on them. It's about building communities. Roman's smile flickered. Over the past 8 years, one person has quietly transformed New York philanthropy. This person has grown a Troy bankrupt family trust into a $240 million engine for change. The room stirred. Math was happening at tables across the ballroom. This person has funded 47 small businesses, 12 affordable housing projects, and 8 youth centers. This person has sat on unglamorous boards not for recognition, but because she genuinely cares. The room erupted in murmurs. Ladies and gentlemen, it is my profound honor to introduce the new chairwoman of the Metropolitan Legacy Fund. The ballroom doors opened. A single spotlight hit the entrance, and Hallie Beaumont Foster walked in wearing her crown. Time seemed to slow as Hallie moved through the ballroom. The emerald green gown caught every light, making her look like she was carved from precious stone. The tiara blazed on her head, emeralds and diamonds refracting light across the vaulted ceiling like stars. Her pregnant belly was unmistakable, but instead of making her look vulnerable, it made her look indomitable. A mother, a warrior, a queen. She didn't hurry. She didn't perform. She simply walked, each step measured and deliberate, past 800 stunned faces, past Vivian Drake, who gave her the slightest nod of acknowledgement, past Senator Hayes, whose face had transformed into grudging respect, past the table of tech CEOs who had dismissed her at countless dinners, past Marcus Reed, whose eyes shone with something that might have been love or pride or both, past Amelia Vance, who was filming every second on her phone, already mentally writing the article that would define her career, and finally past Roman's table. She didn't look at him, he was beneath her notice, a footnote in a story that had always been about her. The room erupted in applause. Not polite, society applause. Real, genuine, standing ovation applause. People were cheering. Roman sat frozen, still not quite understanding what was happening. His face had gone the color of old newspaper. Hallie reached the stage. Arthur took her hand, helped her up the stairs, with careful courtesy for her condition. He placed the MLF chairman's gavel in her hand. The weight of it was perfect. She took the podium and adjusted the microphone. The applause slowly died as people retook their seats. Thank you, Arthur. Thank you all. Her voice was clear and strong, amplified across the ballroom. Not the whisper Roman was used to. This was the voice of someone who had found her power. I know this is a surprise. It certainly surprised my husband. Nervous laughter rippled through the crowd. 2 hours ago, at this very podium, Roman Foster called the Beaumont Trust a hobby. He implied that my work, the work my grandfather started in 1892, the work my father died trying to save, was therapeutic. The room went silent. He told you all that he's been bankrolling my charity projects, that I'm decorative, that my only job is to breed and stay out of the way of real business. People glanced at Roman, whose face was now bright red. Here is what Roman didn't tell you. She pressed a button on the podium. Massive screens around the ballroom flickered to life. The first slide showed financial documents. The Beaumont Trust, which Roman claims to have bankrolled, has grown from $12 million to $240 million in 8 years. That's a 2,000% return. In the same period, Roman's company, Foster Holdings, has lost $85 million. Gasps and murmurs spread like wildfire. The next slide showed corporate structures. Roman told you about his $200 million West Side Renewal project. What he didn't tell you is that it's financed by 14 shell companies, 11 of which are in default. The entire project is built on fraud. Roman stood. This is slander. I'll sue. Sit down, Roman. Hallie's voice was ice. Security guards appeared at the exits. The third slide showed wire transfers. Roman Foster paid $250,000 to City Inspector Gerald Morrison to approve falsified safety permits. Don't take my word for it, Hallie continued. Here's Roman, 2 hours ago, confessing to his assistant and mistress, Vivian Drake. The audio played across the sound system. Roman's voice, crystal clear, admitting to bribery, tax evasion, fraud, calling his wife stupid, planning his divorce. Every damning word. The room exploded in chaos. Some people gasped, others shouted, a few booed. For 8 years, Hallie said, her voice cutting through the noise, I have documented every crime, every affair, every act of financial manipulation. I did it because I knew this day would come, the day when Roman Foster's arrogance would finally catch up to him. Detective Sarah Jenkins and 4 FBI agents in formal wear entered the ballroom. Roman Foster, Jenkins said, her badge held high, you're under arrest for wire fraud, securities fraud, tax evasion, bribery of a public official, and conspiracy. Roman looked around wildly for support, for allies, for anyone who would help him. But 800 faces looked back with expressions ranging from shock to satisfaction to grim vindication. This is a setup, he shouted as agents approached. Arthur, you can't let her do this. Senator Hayes, I've donated to your campaigns. Mr. Foster, Senator Hayes said coldly, standing, I suggest you cooperate with the authorities. The agents handcuffed him. The sound of metal clicking shut echoed in the sudden silence. You'll never see Sophie again, Roman snarled at Hallie, venom dripping from every word. I'll destroy you in family court. You're an unfit mother. Marcus Reed stood from his seat, holding up a folder. Actually, Roman, Judge Carol Henderson granted Mrs. Foster full emergency custody this afternoon at 4 p.m. You're allowed supervised visitation only, pending criminal trial. Oh, and the prenup? Voided due to fraud committed during the marriage. Hallie is entitled to half of your assets, which, as of this morning, she already owns. What? Hallie finally looked at him. Really looked at him, for the first time all evening. I bought your debt, Roman, all $85 million of it. I own Foster Holdings. I own your apartment. I own your cars. I own you too. Understanding crashed over Roman's face like a wave. 8 years. She'd been planning this for 8 years. While he'd been dismissing her as decorative, she'd been systematically dismantling his empire brick by brick. Get him out of here, Hallie said. As the agents dragged him toward the exit, Roman screamed. Not words anymore, just incoherent rage. Guests pulled out their phones, recording everything. Within minutes, the video would have 10 million views. By morning, it would be 200 million. The doors closed behind him. Hallie stood at the podium, composed, unshakable. I apologize for the disruption. Now, as your new MLF chairwoman, let me tell you about our priorities. For the next 10 minutes, she laid out a vision for New York philanthropy that was radical in its simplicity. Fund communities, not developers. Support small businesses, not vanity projects. Build affordable housing that didn't displace the people who needed it most. Invest in women and minorities, in the very people that men like Roman built their empires by exploiting. When she finished, the standing ovation lasted 3 full minutes. Afterward, people swarmed her. Senator Hayes offering full support. CEOs proposing partnerships. Foundation heads wanting to collaborate. Amelia Vance requesting an exclusive interview. Tomorrow, Amelia, Hallie said graciously. Tonight, I need to see my daughter. In a quiet corner, Vivian approached. So that job offer, was that real? Hallie studied her. Did you think I was bluffing? Honestly, I wasn't sure. I don't hate you, Vivian. I hate what Roman turned you into. But you made a choice tonight. You chose right. Vivian's eyes filled with tears. I'm sorry. For all of it. Show up Monday morning, 9 a.m., Beaumont Trust offices. We'll discuss your employment contract. And Vivian, thank you. They shook hands. 2 women who had been pitted against each other by a man who understood neither of them, finding common ground in survival. Outside, Hallie's car waited. Inside, Sophie was waiting with for her nanny, watching videos on an iPad. When she saw her mother, she launched herself into Hallie's arms. "Mommy, you look like a princess." "Not a princess, sweetie. A queen. There's a difference." "What's the difference?" "A princess waits to be rescued. A queen saves herself." They drove home to Brooklyn Heights, to the brownstone Hallie had bought with her own money, to the life she had built independent of Roman Foster. The tiara sat in a box on the seat beside her. She would never wear it again. But she would keep it as a reminder of the night she stopped being a victim and became something else entirely. A survivor, a strategist, a mother, a queen. The story broke before dawn. Amelia Vance's article in the Times was titled, "The Quiet Revolution: How Hallie Beaumont Brought Down New York's Most Arrogant Developer." It went viral within hours. By noon, it had been shared 2 million times. By evening, the Washington Post, LA Times, and Wall Street Journal all had their own versions. The video footage from the gala spawned 1,000 think pieces. The end of the boys' club. When women stopped playing nice. The new face of philanthropy. Feminist blogs dissected every moment. Business schools added the case to their curriculum. Hollywood producers started calling Hallie's lawyer to option the story. Roman's arrest photos showed a man who had aged 10 years in one night. Disheveled, handcuffed, his silver hair standing on end, being led into federal custody while reporters shouted questions he refused to answer. Foster Holdings' stock price collapsed. Trading was suspended after it dropped 80% in the first hour. Creditors moved to liquidate assets. Employees filed lawsuits. Business partners scrambled to distance themselves from the scandal. The West Side Renewal Project was canceled. The city revoked all permits. Federal investigators discovered that Roman had bribed not just one inspector, but 7 different city officials over 3 years. The corruption investigation expanded to include half a dozen other developers. But Hallie wasn't watching the news. She was sitting on her brownstone's floor, assembling a crib while Sophie helped by handing her screws and offering advice. "Mommy, that part goes on the other side." "You're absolutely right, sweetie. Thank you." Marcus stopped by with Chinese takeout. He'd been stopping by a lot, always as a friend, never pushing for more, though the longing in his eyes was obvious to anyone who cared to look. "How are you holding up?" he asked, unpacking moo shu pork and vegetable lo mein. "I'm okay. Tired, but okay." The press wants statements. The talk shows want interviews. Oprah's people called. "Tell them all no. I'm not a celebrity. I'm not a symbol. I'm just a woman who got tired of being treated like a decoration." "You're more than that, Hallie. You know you are." She smiled at him, sad and fond. "Marcus, I need you to understand something. I'm not ready for anything romantic. I might never be ready. Roman broke something in me that's going to take years to heal. If you can't accept that." "I can accept it," he said quickly. "I've waited 20 years, Hallie. I can wait longer, or forever, if that's what you need. I just want to be in your life. Then you're my best friend, my daughter's godfather, my attorney, and that's enough." He nodded, though his eyes betrayed his disappointment. That's enough. 6 months later, Hallie stood in a federal courtroom for Roman's sentencing. The trial had been brief. His own recorded confession made a defense nearly impossible. His lawyers had advised him to take a plea deal, 12 years with possibility of parole after 7. Roman, still clinging to some fantasy of vindication, had refused. The jury deliberated for 3 hours and came back with guilty verdicts on all 8 counts. The judge, a woman in her 60s with steel gray hair and no patience for wealthy criminals, looked down at Roman from the bench. "Mr. Foster, you've been convicted of multiple federal crimes. You used your wealth and position to corrupt public officials, defraud investors, and evade taxes owed to the American people. Your actions directly harmed thousands of people, including your own family. I sentence you to 12 years in federal prison with possibility of parole after 7. Court is adjourned." Roman, thinner now and gray-faced, stood as if to speak. His lawyer pulled him back down. In the gallery, Hallie sat holding baby Eleanor, who was 2 months old and perfect. Sophie sat beside her, squeezing her mother's free hand. Roman turned to look at them one last time before the marshals led him away. His expression was broken, hollow, a man finally understanding the magnitude of what he'd lost. Hallie met his eyes. There was no triumph in her gaze, no satisfaction, just a profound Arctic finality. Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed. Hallie's statement was brief. Justice was served. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have a baby to feed. She walked away. Sophie on one side, Marcus carrying the diaper bag on the other, Eleanor asleep in her arms. The family she had fought so hard to protect, safe at last. Life settled into a new rhythm. The Beaumont Trust offices moved from Manhattan to Brooklyn to a converted warehouse near the waterfront. The staff was young, diverse, brilliant. Vivian Drake proved to be an exceptional CFO, bringing a reformed embezzler's understanding of financial systems and loopholes to legitimate use. We're up 18% this quarter, Vivian reported at a board meeting, and we just funded our 100th small business. The businesses they funded were different from what Roman would have chosen. A Somali restaurant in Queens, a Latina-owned tech startup, a Black woman's bookstore in Harlem. Places that would have been invisible to someone like Roman Foster, but were the actual backbone of the city. The Metropolitan Legacy Fund under Hallie's leadership became a model for modern philanthropy. Community-driven projects, investments in green infrastructure, programs that actually help people rather than just building monuments to donors' egos. She was interviewed by Harvard Business Review, profiled in Vogue, invited to speak at the United Nations. She declined most of it. She had no interest in being famous. She just wanted to do the work. At home, the brownstone in Brooklyn Heights filled with life. Sophie thrived. Her grades improved. She joined the debate team. She stopped flinching at raised voices. Eleanor grew into a happy, curious baby who grabbed at everything and laughed at her older sister's funny faces. Hallie's therapy sessions with Dr. Rivers continued weekly. Healing wasn't linear. There were bad days when the panic attacks came back, when she woke at 3 a.m. convinced she'd imagined her escape and would wake up still trapped. But those days grew less frequent. "You're not broken," Dr. Rivers told her one rainy Thursday. "You were broken. There's a difference. What you are now is healing." On the one-year anniversary of the gala, Hallie stood in Harlem at a ribbon-cutting ceremony. The sign read, "The Robert Beaumont Center for Youth Excellence." She held Eleanor on her hip while Sophie stood beside her, holding the oversized scissors. The community had turned out, hundreds of people, kids bouncing with excitement to see the new facility. Hallie's speech was short. "My father struggled with addiction. He made mistakes. He lost almost everything. But he taught me that legacy isn't what you leave behind when you succeed. It's what you leave behind when you fail. He left me a trust that was almost bankrupt, but he also left me the belief that we can always rebuild. This center is for every kid who comes from a broken home, who has a parent who struggles, who feels like they're starting from behind. You're not. You're starting exactly where you need to be." She cut the ribbon with Sophie's help. Kids poured into the bright, clean space filled with the computers and books and art supplies and hope. That evening on her rooftop garden, Hallie planted herbs with her daughters. The sun set over the Manhattan skyline, painting the building's golden rose. "Mom, do you think Daddy will ever come home?" Sophie asked. "Someday. Not for a long time, but yes." "Will you take him back?" Hallie knelt to Sophie's level. "No, sweetie, but I'll forgive him. There's a difference." "What's the difference?" "Forgiveness means I don't carry his mistakes anymore, but taking him back would mean accepting new ones. I love myself too much for that now." Sophie hugged her fiercely. Eleanor grabbed a fistful of Hallie's hair and gurgled happily. Inside, through the window, the Beaumont tiara sat in its glass case, catching the last rays of sunlight. Not worn, but preserved. A reminder of the night everything changed. They say living well is the best revenge. But this wasn't revenge. This was restoration. Hallie had taken back everything Roman tried to steal. Her name, her agency, her future, and she had built something better in its place. The prison visitation room was institutional and depressing, all cinder block walls painted industrial beige and metal furniture bolted to the floor. Roman Foster, now 50, sat across from his ex-wife. Prison had not been kind to him. He was thin, his silver hair gone mostly white, his face lined in ways that made him look a decade older than his years. Hallie, by contrast, seemed to have grown younger. At 43, she was confident in her skin in a way she'd never been during their marriage. She wore jeans and a simple sweater. No makeup, no performance, just herself. "Thank you for coming," Roman said. His voice was hoarse, uncertain. "Sophie asked me to. She wants to see you next month." His eyes filled with tears. "Really?" "On one condition. You complete the addiction counseling program, and you write her a letter, a real one, apologizing for how you treated her mother." "I will. I have been. The counseling, I mean. I'm 60 days clean now." He paused. "Did you know I had a problem?" "I knew you drank too much, used cocaine at parties. I didn't realize it was an addiction until your intake psych evaluation became public record." "I'm sorry." He looked down at his hands, which were rough now from prison labor. "I'm so sorry, Hallie, for everything. The affairs, the cruelty, the way I spoke to you, the way I made you feel small. You were brilliant, and I was terrified of that. So I tried to crush it out of you. I'm sorry." Hallie studied him. She'd imagined this conversation for years during her marriage, imagined all the things she'd say if he ever apologized. Now that the moment was here, she found she didn't need most of them. "I forgave you a long time ago, Roman. Not for you, for me. Because carrying that anger was like drinking poison and expecting you to die. Do you ever think about what we could have been? If I'd been different, if I'd seen you for who you really were?" "No, because I'm exactly who I was meant to be. And you're exactly where you need to be to figure out who you are without the money and the power. Maybe you'll find someone worth being." She stood to leave. "Hallie, wait. I saw the article about the Beaumont Center and the new women's shelter in Queens and the scholarship program. You've changed the city, changed the world. I want you to know that I'm proud of you." She looked at him for a long moment. "Thank you. That actually means something." As she walked out, Roman watched her go. The woman he'd tried to diminish had become everything he'd pretended to be. Powerful, respected, genuinely good. And he was left with only his regrets and the long, slow work of becoming someone who might someday deserve his daughter's respect, if not their love. Outside, Marcus waited in the car. "How was it?" "Sad, but necessary. Sophie needs to know that her father is still human, still capable of growth, even if that growth came at enormous cost." "You're a better person than I am. I wanted him to rot." "He is rotting, Marcus, just slowly and with the possibility of redemption. That's justice, not vengeance." They drove back to Brooklyn in comfortable silence. Marcus had been there for every crisis, every triumph, every late-night panic attack and early morning breakthrough. He'd watched Hallie rebuild herself piece by piece, and he'd been content to love her from a respectful distance, asking for nothing, accepting everything. "Marcus, I need to tell you something." "Okay." "I've been in therapy for 5 years. I've done EMDR for the trauma. I've working through the financial abuse, the emotional manipulation, the fear. I've built a life I'm proud of, and through all of it, you've been there. Never pushing, never demanding, just being there." He waited, hardly daring to hope. "I'm ready now, if the offer still stands, if you are still interested in more than friendship." His hands tightened on the steering wheel. "Hallie, I've been in love with you since we were 20 years old. The offer doesn't just still stand. It's the only offer I've ever made that mattered." She leaned over and kissed his cheek. "Then take me to dinner. Somewhere nice. We'll see where it goes." For the first time in years, Marcus smiled like the sun had come out after a long winter. 10 years after the gala, Hallie stood on stage at the Metropolitan Legacy Fund's annual event, a very different affair from the one that had ended her marriage. This gala was held in a community center in the Bronx, not the Met. The guests were small business owners, teachers, community organizers, people who did the actual work of making the city better. "When I became chairwoman of the MLF," Hallie said, "I promised to change how we think about philanthropy, to shift from monuments to movements, from buildings to bridges between communities." Behind her, a screen showed the statistics. 1,000 small businesses funded, 15,000 jobs created, 23 new community centers, 50,000 children served by after-school programs, $200 million invested in green infrastructure. But the work isn't done. It's never done. Every generation has to recommit to the work of building a more just, more equitable, more compassionate city, which is why tonight I'm announcing my retirement as MLF chairwoman. Gasps rippled through the audience. Marcus, sitting in the front row with Eleanor, now 10, and Sophie, now 19, home from Yale for the weekend, looked surprised. After 10 years, it's time for new leadership. Fresh vision. The world is changing and the MLF needs to change with it. So let me introduce the person who'll take us into the next decade. The spotlight swung to reveal a young woman in the wings. Mid-30s, brilliant, energetic. Dr. Keisha Williams, who'd grown up in public housing in Brooklyn and was now a professor of urban development at Columbia. Dr. Williams represents everything I believe in. She's from the community she serves. She understands that real change doesn't come from the top down, but from the ground up. She's brilliant, she's fearless, and she's ready. Please welcome the new chairwoman of the Metropolitan Legacy Fund. The applause was thunderous. Hallie embraced Keisha, whispered, "Make them work for it," and stepped back. Afterward at home, the family gathered around the kitchen table. Sophie, Marcus, Eleanor, and Hallie. Marcus was technically Hallie's boyfriend of 5 years, though everyone knew he was more than that. He'd proposed twice. She'd said not yet twice. But she'd also never asked him to leave, and his toothbrush had been in her bathroom for 3 years. "Mom, why did you step down?" Eleanor asked. At 10, she was fierce and curious, already determined to be the first female president. Because holding on to power for too long is how you become the thing you fought against. I stayed long enough to make real change. Now it's someone else's turn. But you could have done more. Maybe. But the question isn't always, can I do more? Sometimes it's, have I done enough to let someone else take the next step? Sophie, home from Yale, where she was studying constitutional law with an eye toward family advocacy, raised her glass of wine. To Mom, who taught us that power isn't about keeping it, it's about knowing when to give it away. They toasted. Outside, Brooklyn hummed with life. The city Hallie had helped reshape, one quiet investment at a time. Later, after the girls were asleep, Marcus found Hallie on the roof garden. The tiara sat on the table between them, pulled from its case for the first time in years. "Why did you bring that up?" Marcus asked. "Because I'm going to give it to Sophie when she graduates Yale, a reminder that sometimes you have to take the crown yourself, but eventually you have to decide what that crown means. She's going to do incredible things, they both are. I know, and they'll do them knowing that their mother didn't wait to be saved. She saved herself." Marcus took her hand. "Marry me." "You've asked me that before." Third time's the charm. "Why now?" "Because for 10 years I've watched you heal. I've watched you build. I've watched you grow into the person you always were, but couldn't be with him. And I realize I don't need you to marry me. I just want you to know that the offer is permanent. Forever. Whether you ever say yes or not." Hallie looked at him. Really looked at him. Marcus, who'd loved her when she was broken. Who'd helped her fight. Who'd never asked for anything except to be in her orbit. "Ask me again in a year." "Why a year?" "Because Eleanor deserves to be old enough to be the flower girl. And Sophie should be there, not buried in law school finals. And because I want to be sure I'm saying yes because I want to, not because I think I should." Marcus smiled. "That's the most Hallie answer imaginable." "Is that okay?" "It's perfect." They sat together under the stars, watching the city lights. Two people who'd found their way to each other through different paths, but had ended up in the same place. Whole, healed, home. Below them in the brownstone's front window, the light from Eleanor's room went dark. Sophie stayed on. She was probably reading Supreme Court cases for fun. The Beaumont Trust offices would open Monday morning. Vivian would be there, as she had been for 10 years, managing the finances with the zeal of a convert. The MLF would carry on under new leadership. The businesses they'd funded would continue to grow. The communities they'd invested in would continue to thrive. But here, now, on this Brooklyn rooftop, none of that mattered. What mattered was the choice Hallie had made 10 years ago. To stop accepting cruelty. To fight back with patience and precision. To reclaim not just her wealth or her power, but herself. The crown had never been Roman's to give. It had always been hers to take. And having taken it, having worn it, having proven her point, she'd done the most powerful thing of all. She'd passed it on. Not to a man, not to someone who wanted to use her, but to her daughters who would carry the Beaumont name forward into a world that was slowly, painfully, learning to value women not for their beauty or their silence, but for their strength and their voice. The quiet wife had become a queen, and then, in her greatest act of power, she'd chosen to become something better. A mother, a mentor, a woman at peace. The story could have ended in revenge. Instead, it ended in restoration. And that, Hallie thought, looking at the man who'd waited for her with infinite patience and the life she'd built from the ashes of her marriage, was the greatest victory of all.